My name is Abigail Mitchell, but everyone calls me Abby. I'm 32 years old, and I've always been the responsible one, especially when it came to my younger sister Madison. Growing up, I watched my parents shower her with attention while I stood in the shadows. Still, I loved her enough to give her $96,000 for her dream wedding. Then, with one text message, she banned me from attending. I stared at my phone, tears blurring my vision, unable to process this betrayal. If you've ever been stabbed in the back by someone you love, drop a comment below and hit subscribe. This family drama is about to get real. I've always been the type of person who believes in working hard for what you want. After graduating high school with honors, I earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University, where I studied finance and economics. While my friends partied on weekends, I worked part-time jobs and internships, building my resume and saving every penny I could. By 25, I had secured a position at a respected financial advisory firm in Chicago, and by 30, I was managing my own client portfolio. My two-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park isn't extravagant, but it's mine. I've decorated it with secondhand furniture, I've refinished myself and art from local street fairs. I drive a reliable 5-year-old Honda that's fully paid off. And I maintain a strict budget that allows me to save approximately 30% of my income each month. Financial security has always been important to me, especially given my upbringing. Madison is 5 years younger than me, and despite our parents' obvious favoritism, I adored her from the moment they brought her home from the hospital. When she was 7 and I was 12, I would walk her to and from elementary school, holding her small hand in mine as we navigated the suburban streets of our childhood neighborhood in Evanston, Illinois. I helped her with homework, especially math, which always frustrated her to tears. On weekend mornings, I would wake up early to make us both bowls of Lucky Charms before our parents got up. And we'd watch cartoons with the volume low so we wouldn't disturb anyone. We had our secret adventures too. I'd save my allowance to take Madison for ice cream at the local parlor, where we'd create outlandish sundaes with too many toppings. During summer breaks, I taught her how to swim in Lake Michigan, patiently holding her up in the water until she gained the confidence to float on her own. When she was 10, I helped her build an elaborate fort in the backyard using old sheets and garden stakes. And we spent an entire July weekend sleeping outside, telling ghost stories by flashlight. Throughout it all, our parents' preference for Madison was unmistakable. My father, Richard, built a successful construction company from the ground up, and by the time I was in high school, we lived in a sprawling 5-bedroom house in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in Evanston. My mother, Elizabeth, embraced the role of social climber with enthusiasm, joining country clubs and hosting dinner parties for my father's business associates. While Madison received the latest toys, designer clothes, and extravagant birthday parties, I was constantly reminded to be practical. When I needed a graphing calculator for advanced math classes, my parents suggested I babysit to earn the money. When Madison wanted horseback riding lessons at the age of 9, they immediately signed her up at the most exclusive equestrian center in the area. When I was accepted to Northwestern, my parents congratulated me but made it clear that a scholarship was expected. When Madison decided to attend a small liberal arts college with tuition nearly twice as high, they covered every expense without question. I don't want to sound bitter. I'm proud of what I've accomplished on my own. The self-reliance I developed has served me well in my career and life. But I can't deny that it hurt to witness the disparity in how we were treated. Still, I channeled that hurt into determination rather than resentment, at least toward Madison. She didn't ask for the favoritism, and in many ways, I felt it was my responsibility to provide her with a more balanced perspective on life than our parents offered. As we entered adulthood, the gap between us widened. While I was working 60-hour weeks to establish my career, Madison was posting Instagram photos from spring break in Cabo and studying abroad in Paris. She majored in communications but never seemed particularly focused on building a career. After college, she worked briefly at a PR firm before landing a position as a social media manager for a boutique marketing agency, a job she seemed to treat more as a hobby than a profession. 3 years ago, Madison met Tyler Harrington at a charity gala our parents had dragged her to. Tyler came from old money, his family owning several car dealerships across the Midwest. He was handsome in that preppy country club way with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch always glinting on his wrist. When Madison first introduced us over dinner, I found him polite but slightly condescending, particularly when he discussed my career in finance, suggesting that his family's wealth manager could give me some pointers. What troubled me most was how quickly Madison seemed to transform in Tyler's presence. Her normally bubbly personality became more subdued and agreeable. She began dressing differently, trading her colorful, creative outfits for more conservative, expensive brands that Tyler's mother approved of. Her social media, once filled with friends and spontaneous adventures, became a carefully curated showcase of their relationship, featuring exclusive restaurants and luxury vacations. Despite these changes, I supported her happiness. We still met for monthly brunches when our schedules aligned, though our conversations increasingly centered around Tyler, his family, and their social circle. I noticed that Madison rarely asked about my life anymore, but I chalked it up to the excitement of new love. When they got engaged after dating for 18 months, I was genuinely happy for her, though not entirely surprised. The Harrington name was exactly the kind of connection our mother had always hoped to make. Little did I know that their engagement would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately destroy the last remnants of the bond we once shared as sisters. Madison's engagement announcement was nothing short of theatrical. Tyler had proposed at sunset on a private yacht on Lake Michigan, with a photographer hidden nearby to capture the moment. The ring was a flawless 4-carat diamond set in platinum, which Madison flashed at every opportunity. Our parents hosted an engagement dinner at their country club, inviting close family and friends to celebrate. The evening was elegant, with champagne flowing freely and my father giving a tearful toast about his little princess finding her prince. I sat at a table with distant cousins, watching as Madison and Tyler held court at the center of the room, accepting congratulations and showing off the ring to admiring guests. When it was my turn to offer congratulations, Madison hugged me tightly and whispered, "I want you right by my side through all of this, Abby." It was during coffee and dessert that the wedding expectations began to take shape. Tyler's mother, Vivian, a slender woman with an immaculate blonde bob and perpetually pursed lips, spoke animatedly about potential venues in Chicago, mentioning the Peninsula and the Four Seasons as acceptable options. My mother nodded enthusiastically, adding that they had always envisioned a statement wedding for Madison. I noticed my father's smile tighten slightly at the direction of the conversation, but he kept refilling his whiskey and saying little. 2 weeks later, the first official wedding planning meeting took place at my parents' house. Madison had created elaborate Pinterest boards and brought wedding magazines with dozens of pages folded down. Tyler's parents joined us, his father Howard mostly silent while Vivian and my mother exchanged ideas that grew increasingly grand with each glass of wine they consumed. The venue discussions settled on the Drake Hotel, one of Chicago's most historic and expensive wedding locations. When Vivian casually mentioned that her nephew had married there last year for only about $150,000, I watched my father's face pale slightly. Tyler's parents excused themselves early, with Vivian reminding everyone that they would be happy to contribute their portion once the final numbers were decided. After they left, the facade crumbled. My father loosened his tie and poured himself another drink before clearing his throat uncomfortably. "Madison, sweetheart, we need to talk about budget," he said carefully. "Business has been a bit tight this year with the new regulations affecting construction contracts." My mother shot him a warning glance, but he continued, "We can contribute $75,000, which is still very generous, but these plans you're making, they're going to cost twice that." Madison's eyes immediately welled with tears. "But Daddy, you always said I could have whatever wedding I wanted. The Drake is perfect. Tyler's family is expecting it to be amazing." "We know, Princess," my mother said soothingly, throwing another irritated look at my father. "We'll figure something out." Maybe we can cut back in areas guests won't notice. Madison was inconsolable. Everything is important. The flowers, the band, the dress. I can't cut corners on the most important day of my life. Tyler's cousins all had perfect weddings. I can't be the one with the budget reception. I sat quietly during this exchange, feeling uncomfortable witnessing the family dynamics I'd grown so familiar with. Madison's tears always worked on our parents, and I could see my father's resolve weakening by the second. Part of me wanted to point out that a wedding was one day, while financial stability was a lifetime concern. But I knew my practical perspective wouldn't be welcome. 3 days later, Madison asked me to meet her for coffee at a quiet cafe near my office. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she looked like she hadn't slept well. After ordering, she reached across the table and grabbed my hands. "Abby, I need your help," she said, her voice quavering. "Mom and Dad can't give as much as they promised for the wedding, and Tyler's parents will only match what our parents put in. I'm going to have to cancel the Drake. And Tyler's family is going to think I'm not good enough." I squeezed her hands sympathetically. "Madison, I'm sure Tyler loves you regardless of where you get married. Maybe this is an opportunity to create something more personal and meaningful." She shook her head frantically. "You don't understand. This isn't just about the wedding. It's about fitting into their world. If I can't even pull off the right kind of wedding, how am I going to be accepted as a Harrington? Is that really what matters?" I asked gently. "Please don't judge me," she pleaded. "I love Tyler, and this is important to him too. He grew up with certain expectations." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Abby, I want you to be my maid of honor. You're my sister, my best friend. I need you by my side through all of this." I felt a surge of emotion. Despite our differences and the distance that had grown between us, her words touched me deeply. Madison hadn't called me her best friend since we were teenagers. "Of course I'll be your maid of honor," I said, smiling through sudden tears. She squeezed my hands tighter. "There's one more thing. I know you're good with money, that you save a lot. Is there any way you could help with the wedding costs? I swear I'll pay you back after. Tyler and I will both have good jobs, and his trust fund kicks in when he turns 30 next year." I froze, caught off guard by the request. The logical part of my brain immediately calculated that my emergency fund and investment portfolio could technically cover additional wedding expenses. But the emotional part questioned the wisdom of mixing family and finances. "How much are you thinking?" I asked cautiously. "96,000 would cover the gap," she said, the number rolling off her tongue so precisely that I knew she had calculated it beforehand. "I know it's a lot, but like I said, I'll pay you back, with interest even." $96,000. The amount represented nearly 4 years of careful saving, money I had earmarked for eventually buying a condo in the city. It was a significant portion of my financial safety net. "I'd need some kind of formal agreement," I said slowly, financial advisor instincts kicking in despite the familial context. "A payment plan, something in writing." Madison's face lit up. Hope replacing despair. "Of course. We can draw something up, make it official. You're the best sister ever, Abby. This means everything to me." We spent the next hour outlining terms. I would transfer the money in installments as vendors needed to be paid. Madison and Tyler would begin repayment 3 months after the wedding with modest interest. We would put it all in writing with signatures. When I told our parents about the arrangement, my mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "I knew you'd come through for your sister." My father patted my shoulder awkwardly, expressing gratitude while avoiding eye contact, perhaps embarrassed that his older daughter was bailing out the family financially. Madison called me that night, her voice bubbling with excitement rather than tears. "Abby, I can never thank you enough. This wedding is going to be perfect, and you're making it happen. I can't wait to plan everything together." As I hung up the phone, I felt a mixture of emotions. Pride in being able to help, anxiety about the financial risk. But mostly hope that this experience might bring Madison and me closer again, recreating some of the bond we'd shared as children. In that moment, I truly believed the money would be worth it for the chance to rebuild our relationship. I had no idea how catastrophically wrong I would be. With the financial arrangement settled, Madison immediately resumed wedding planning with renewed enthusiasm. For the first time in years, we began spending significant time together. The first few months were genuinely enjoyable, reminiscent of our childhood closeness. We toured the Drake Hotel together, Madison clutching my arm as we wandered through the grand ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and panoramic views of Lake Michigan. When she signed the contract, securing the Saturday in June she wanted, she hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you for making this possible," in my ear. Shopping for her wedding dress became a full weekend event. Madison, our mother, and I visited 5 exclusive bridal boutiques where she tried on countless gowns while I held her champagne and offered sincere compliments. When she finally emerged in a custom Vera Wang creation that cost more than my first car, the tears in her eyes seemed to justify every penny I had agreed to spend. In that moment, watching her twirl in front of the mirror, I felt like the big sister I'd always tried to be, the one who could make dreams come true. We spent evenings at my apartment looking through sample invitations, flower arrangements, and menu options. Madison valued my opinion on the financial aspects, asking me to review vendor contracts before signing. I created detailed spreadsheets tracking expenses against the budget, feeling useful and included. During these planning sessions, Madison would reminisce about our childhood, recalling specific memories I thought she had forgotten. She seemed genuinely interested in my life as well, asking about my work and even a man I had recently started dating. The bridal party consisted of Madison's college roommate Jessica as co-maid of honor alongside me, plus 4 other bridesmaids. Ashley and Rachel from her sorority, Tyler's sister Brittany, and our cousin Samantha. Our first group outing to select bridesmaid dresses was surprisingly pleasant. I connected particularly well with Rachel, who worked in marketing but had an interest in financial planning. We exchanged numbers and made plans to meet for coffee outside of wedding activities. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things began to change. 3 months into planning, we attended a tasting at the Drake to finalize the reception menu. Tyler's parents joined us, and Vivian spent the entire time making subtle comparisons to her nephew's wedding. With each past appetizer and wine pairing, Madison grew increasingly tense, upgrading options and adding extras that weren't in the original budget. When I gently reminded her about costs afterward, she snapped for the first time. "It's not like it's coming out of your pocket right away," she said dismissively. "You'll get it all back with interest, remember? And anyway, we can't look cheap in front of the Harringtons." From that point forward, Madison's attitude toward me shifted subtly but unmistakably. My suggestions were increasingly met with resistance or outright dismissal. If I recommended a reasonably priced florist, Madison would counter that Tyler's cousin had used a more exclusive vendor. When I presented options for the wedding cake, she barely glanced at them before declaring they weren't special enough. During a meeting with the wedding planner, I proposed a beautiful string quartet I had found that charged half what the planner's recommended band did. Madison exchanged a look with the planner before saying, "Abby, you don't really understand the atmosphere we're trying to create. This isn't a corporate event, it's a once-in-a-lifetime celebration." I swallowed my hurt at her condescending tone and reminded myself that wedding planning was stressful for everyone. But the incidents continued to accumulate. Madison began scheduling appointments without telling me until the last minute, then acting put out when I couldn't rearrange my work schedule to attend. She started deferring to Tyler's mother's opinions over mine, even on decisions we had previously discussed together. The bridal party dynamics complicated matters further. Jessica, Madison's co-maid of honor, had always been somewhat cold toward me, but now she barely concealed her disdain. At a bridesmaid's lunch I helped organize, I overheard Jessica in the bathroom telling Ashley that Madison only made me co-maid of honor because she felt obligated since Abby's paying for everything. "It's kind of sad, really," Jessica continued, unaware I was in a stall. "Madison says Abby has always been jealous of her. Apparently, she's trying to control everything about the wedding because she's still single and bitter." I sat frozen, the words stinging more than they should have. Madison had said those things about me? After all I'd done to support her? I wanted to confront Jessica or discuss it with Madison, but I feared creating drama that would only make things worse. Instead, I pushed the hurt aside and redoubled my efforts to be the perfect supportive sister. Then came the bridesmaid weekend in Michigan wine country, organized by Jessica without my input despite my co-maid of honor status. I received the invitation just 1 week before the event, when I had already scheduled an important client meeting I couldn't reschedule. When I called Madison to explain my conflict, her response was chilling. "It's fine, Abby. We'll have more fun without you anyway. You always make everything about budgets and practicality." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Jessica has planned some amazing surprises that you probably wouldn't approve of." The exclusion hurt. But what bothered me more was discovering through social media that the weekend at an exclusive resort had been charged to the wedding account I was funding. When I brought this up to Madison, she became defensive. "The bachelorette party is part of the wedding expenses, Abby. Everyone knows that. If you had bothered to come, you would have been included in the fun your money paid for." Financial issues continued to multiply. The wedding planner began contacting me directly about upgrades Madison had approved without discussing them with me first. The original $96,000 I had agreed to provide was rapidly proving insufficient as Madison authorized extra charges: premium liquor for the open bar, additional floral installations, welcome bags for out-of-town guests staying at the hotel. Each time I tried to discuss these overages, Madison would either burst into tears, claiming I was trying to ruin her special day, or coldly remind me that this was an investment in our relationship that would be paid back in full. She began using the repayment as a weapon, saying things like, "Don't worry. I'll add that extra $2,000 for the ice sculpture to the loan total. Every penny will be returned to you." What had started as a genuine desire to help my sister and rebuild our relationship had transformed into a financial and emotional nightmare from which I could see no easy escape. I had already transferred over $70,000. The contracts were signed in Madison's name, but with my money, and backing out would mean accepting those funds were lost forever. More troubling than the money, though, was watching my sister become someone I barely recognized. The Madison who had shared ice cream sundaes and backyard camping adventures with me had disappeared, replaced by a woman obsessed with appearances and social standing, willing to exploit my generosity and dismiss my feelings in pursuit of the perfect wedding day. Still, I clung to the hope that this was temporary stress, that once the wedding was over, my real sister would return and our relationship could heal. I had no idea that the worst betrayal was yet to come. 6 weeks before the wedding, Madison scheduled her final dress fitting. This was the moment I had been looking forward to most, a special sister tradition where I would help her prepare for her big day. I arrived at the high-end boutique 15 minutes early, excited to share this milestone. When I entered the shop, I was surprised to find not only Madison already there, but also her future mother-in-law Vivian, Jessica, and Tyler's sister Brittany. They were all sipping champagne and laughing together, clearly having been there for some time. "Abby," Madison exclaimed, looking momentarily flustered. "I didn't realize you'd be so early." "I'm not early," I said quietly. "Our appointment was for 2 o'clock. "Oh, we started a bit earlier," she said vaguely. "Vivian had another engagement later, so we adjusted." No one had bothered to tell me. I pushed aside my hurt feelings and plastered on a smile, accepting the glass of champagne the consultant offered. Madison was already wearing her wedding gown, the consultant making final adjustments to the hem. "You look beautiful," I said sincerely, blinking back unexpected tears. The moment was interrupted when the consultant mentioned it was time for the bridesmaids to try on their dresses for final alterations. I went to the dressing room and changed into the dusty rose gown we had selected months earlier. When I emerged, Madison's expression shifted from joy to visible disappointment. "Oh," she said, looking me up and down. "I forgot how that looks on you." "What do you mean?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. "It's just..." Madison tilted her head critically. "The color washes you out. And the cut isn't really flattering on your figure." Vivian nodded in agreement. "Perhaps we could add some additional fabric in certain areas?" Or maybe Abby could try losing 10 pounds before the wedding, Jessica suggested with a fake sweetness that made it clear she was not joking. The room fell silent. I stood there in the expensive dress I had already paid for, feeling completely humiliated. Madison didn't defend me. Instead, she laughed lightly and said, "Well, we don't have time for major changes now. The photos are what they are." I retreated to the dressing room, hands shaking as I changed back into my clothes. I heard the women continue chatting and laughing outside, my sister's voice blending with theirs as if nothing hurtful had occurred. When I emerged, I made an excuse about a work emergency and left quickly, ignoring Madison's distracted biases. Once safely in my car, I allowed myself to cry, truly cry. For the first time since this wedding process began. The dress comment itself wasn't what broke me, it was the realization that Madison had allowed, even encouraged, others to humiliate me. The sister I had protected and loved my whole life couldn't be bothered to show me the same basic respect in return. That evening, Madison called as if nothing had happened. When I calmly explained how hurt I felt, she immediately became defensive. "You're being way too sensitive, Abby. No one meant anything by it." Jessica was obviously joking. And Vivian was trying to be helpful. She sighed dramatically. "This is exactly why I didn't want to say anything about the dress in the first place. I knew you'd overreact." "So you've been thinking the dress looks bad on me this whole time?" I asked incredulously. "It's not ideal, but it's fine," she said dismissively. "Look, this is my wedding. Everything needs to be perfect. Can you please just focus on the big picture instead of making this about you?" I took a deep breath, determined to salvage the situation. "You're right. It's your day. Let's just move past this." Madison immediately brightened. "Great. So about the rehearsal dinner, I've been thinking we should upgrade the menu to include the seafood option. It's only about 30 more per person." And just like that, we were back to wedding planning, my feelings swept aside like inconvenient crumbs at one of her fancy venue tastings. I agreed to host and pay for the rehearsal dinner, another expense outside our original agreement, hoping this gesture might improve the increasingly strained atmosphere between us. The next few weeks became a blur of last-minute wedding details and constantly escalating costs. Madison's demands grew more unreasonable by the day. The rehearsal dinner menu was revised 4 times, each version more elaborate than the last. She insisted on custom monogrammed napkins that had to be rushed at triple the normal cost. 2 days before I was set to place the final deposit, she texted to say she had added 15 more guests to the list, mostly Tyler's business associates I would never meet. With each new demand, I felt my patience and goodwill eroding. The financial burden, now well beyond the agreed-upon amount, was significant, but the emotional cost was becoming unbearable. I barely recognized my relationship with Madison anymore. We communicated almost exclusively about wedding details, and every interaction left me feeling drained and undervalued. The final straw came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 24 days before the wedding. I was in a client meeting when my phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Glancing down, I saw a wall of text that began, "I've been thinking a lot about the wedding day and the overall vibe we're trying to create." I excused myself and stepped into the hallway to read the full message. "I've been thinking a lot about the wedding day and the overall vibe we're trying to create. And I've made the difficult decision to ask you to step back from your role in the ceremony. The tension between you and the other bridesmaids is creating negative energy that I can't have on my special day. Jessica will handle all the maid of honor duties going forward. I think it's best if you just attend as a guest, sitting with our extended family rather than at the head table. You seem to be having issues with my choices and with Tyler's family. And your attitude is making things uncomfortable for everyone. I know this is difficult to hear, but I need to do what's best for my wedding. The money was the least you could do after everything our parents did for you growing up anyway. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I read the message 3 times, unable to process what I was seeing. Madison wasn't just demoting me from maid of honor, she was effectively banning me from any meaningful participation in the wedding. And that final comment about the money being the least I could do revealed how she truly viewed my contribution, not as a generous act of love, but as some kind of obligatory repayment. With hands shaking, I called her immediately. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. I texted asking her to please call me so we could discuss this directly. An hour later, she responded with a single line, "There's nothing to discuss. Please respect my decision." I left work early that day, too distraught to focus. At home, I called our parents, hoping they could help mediate the situation. My mother answered, her voice immediately guarded when she heard mine. Madison already told us about her decision, she said before I could explain. "I think you need to respect her wishes, Abby. It's her wedding day." "Did she tell you why?" I asked, stunned by my mother's casual dismissal. "Did she mention that I've contributed nearly $100,000 to this wedding? Money she promised to pay back." My mother sighed. "Madison said you've been difficult throughout the planning process, constantly reminding her about the money and trying to control everything. She said you've been jealous of her relationship with Tyler and his family." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Madison had completely twisted the reality of our interactions, painting me as the villain in a story where I had done nothing but support her. "None of that is true," I said, my voice breaking. "I've bent over backwards to accommodate every request, paid for extras beyond our agreement, and swallowed my feelings when she and her friends have been outright cruel to me." "Well, that's not how Madison sees it," my father interjected, apparently listening on another extension. "And frankly, Abby, if you gave her the money with strings attached, that's on you. A gift should be a gift." "It wasn't a gift," I exclaimed. "We had a written agreement about repayment. This was a loan to help her have the wedding she wanted." "We're not getting involved in your financial arrangements," my mother said firmly. "All we know is that Madison is extremely upset, and we need to support her right now. I suggest you take some time to cool off and accept that this is how things will be." The call ended shortly after, leaving me feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. My own parents had sided with Madison without question, without even hearing my side of the story. The betrayal was complete, the family dynamics of my childhood playing out once again with painful clarity. I sat on my couch until well past midnight, replaying Madison's text message and my parents' response, trying to make sense of how things had deteriorated so drastically. By the time exhaustion finally overtook me, one thing had become crystal clear: I had been used. The money, the months of support and planning, even our rekindled relationship, had all been a means to an end for Madison. And now that she had what she wanted, I was disposable. As I finally drifted into restless sleep, a small, determined voice in the back of my mind whispered that this was not how the story would end. I had spent my life being reasonable, responsible, and accommodating, especially with my family. But there comes a point when enough is enough. Madison had crossed a line from which there was no return, and for the first time in my life, I was prepared to stand up for myself, whatever the consequences might be. The morning after receiving Madison's devastating text, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, cycling through disbelief, hurt, and finally, simmering anger. By afternoon, I knew I needed perspective from someone who wasn't emotionally invested in my family dynamics. I called my friend Taylor, who had witnessed the entire wedding saga from the beginning. "She did what?" Taylor exclaimed after I relayed Madison's message. "After taking all that money from you? Abby, that's beyond entitled. That's just plain cruel." "My parents are taking her side," I said, my voice hollow. "They think I should just accept it and still attend as a regular guest." Taylor was silent for a moment. "Can I be brutally honest with you? This isn't just about the wedding. This is about a lifetime of your family taking advantage of your responsible nature. They know you'll always do the right thing, even when they don't. That's why they expect you to roll over now." Her words hit me like a physical blow because I recognized their truth immediately. Throughout my life, I had been the responsible one, the reasonable one, the one who made sacrifices while Madison received the rewards. I had been playing a role assigned to me since childhood, never questioning whether I deserved better treatment. "What would you do?" I asked quietly. I'd get my money back and let them deal with the consequences, Taylor said without hesitation. You have a written agreement, right? Use it. After our call, I sat with this possibility, turning it over in my mind. The idea of taking legal action against my own sister felt extreme, but so was being banned from a wedding I had largely financed. I decided to consult a professional before making any decisions. My college friend Stephanie had become a contract lawyer, specializing in financial disputes. She agreed to meet me for dinner that evening to review the situation. Over pasta that I barely touched, I showed her the written agreement Madison, Tyler, and I had all signed, as well as documentation of all the transfers I had made. Stephanie studied the papers carefully, occasionally making notes. This is actually a very solid agreement, she said finally. You were smart to get everything in writing, including the repayment terms and interest. So, what are my options? I asked. Several, she replied, counting off on her fingers. First, you could send a formal demand letter requesting immediate repayment of all funds due to breach of the spirit of the agreement. Second, you could place a hold on any remaining funds you haven't yet transferred. Third, you could contact the vendors directly, informing them of the payment dispute. Fourth, in the most extreme case, you could file for a temporary injunction preventing the use of disputed funds. She paused, her expression softening. That said, this is your sister, Abby. Once you take legal steps, your relationship may never recover. Are you prepared for that possibility? I thought about Madison's text, about my parents' dismissal, about years of being taken for granted. I think the relationship is already beyond repair, I said quietly. At this point, I just want to protect myself. Stephanie nodded. Then let's start with a formal letter. It establishes your position without immediately escalating to court action. We can draft it tonight. Over the next 2 hours, Stephanie helped me compose a clear, legally sound letter stating that due to Madison's decision to exclude me from the wedding contrary to our understanding when the financial agreement was made, I was requesting immediate repayment of all funds transferred to date, totaling $87,500. The letter noted that if repayment wasn't received within 7 days, I would pursue all legal remedies available, including potentially contacting wedding vendors about the disputed funds. I sent the letter by certified mail the next morning and forwarded a digital copy to both Madison and Tyler's emails. Then I began the process of documenting everything. I compiled all text messages, emails, and notes from conversations related to the wedding finances. I created a detailed spreadsheet tracking every payment, including dates, amounts, and purposes. I gathered receipts and bank statements showing transfers from my accounts. While organizing this evidence, I discovered something troubling. In reviewing the wedding planning email account Madison had given me access to, I found correspondence between her and Tyler discussing the loan. In one particularly damning exchange from just 2 weeks earlier, Madison wrote, "Once we're married, we can just ignore the repayment thing with Abby." What's she going to do? Sue her own sister? Mom and Dad would never let that happen. Tyler had responded, "Exactly. Plus, once we combine our finances after the wedding, we can claim financial hardship if she really pushes it. Your parents will back us up." I felt physically ill reading their calculated plan to defraud me. This wasn't just Madison being caught up in wedding stress or making an impulsive decision to exclude me. This was premeditated financial exploitation of my goodwill. They had never intended to repay the loan. Armed with this new information, I called Stephanie again. Things just escalated, I told her, forwarding the emails. They were planning to default on the loan all along. Stephanie's tone turned serious after reading the exchanges. "This changes things, Abby. This is evidence of intentional fraud. We need to move more aggressively to protect your interests." With Stephanie's guidance, I took several immediate actions. First, I froze the remaining funds in the joint account I had set up for wedding expenses, which still contained about $9,000 earmarked for final vendor payments. Next, I drafted formal notices to all the major vendors Madison had contracted, informing them of the payment dispute and advising them to contact me directly before processing any final charges or making arrangements for services. Within hours of sending these notices, my phone exploded with notifications. Madison called 7 times in succession, each call going to voicemail, as I wasn't emotionally prepared to speak with her directly. She followed with a barrage of texts ranging from furious accusations, "How dare you contact MY vendors?" to tearful pleas, "Please don't ruin my wedding. I'll do anything," to outright threats, "You'll never be welcome in this family again if you continue this." Tyler called next, his normally polished tone replaced with barely controlled rage. I let this go to voicemail as well, listening later as he lectured me about family loyalty and making a scene over money. The irony of his focus on loyalty wasn't lost on me. The most difficult calls came from my parents. My mother alternated between sobbing and berating me, insisting I was destroying Madison's happiness out of jealousy. My father, usually more reserved, threatened to disown me if I didn't immediately retract all legal notices and apologize to Madison and the Harringtons for the embarrassment I had caused. Through it all, I maintained my silence, communicating only through Stephanie, who advised me to let the legal process play out without getting drawn into emotional confrontations. She assured me my position was legally sound and that my actions were reasonable given the evidence of planned fraud. The vendor responses were mixed. Some immediately put holds on their services pending resolution of the payment dispute. Others, having already received partial or full payment, were reluctant to get involved in what they viewed as a family matter. The wedding venue, which had the largest outstanding balance, was the most responsive, informing Madison and Tyler that they would need to provide a new deposit to secure the date since the original payment was under dispute. As the responses from vendors rolled in, Madison's tactics shifted from anger to negotiation. 3 days after I sent the initial letter, she requested a meeting to work things out. On Stephanie's advice, I agreed to meet at a neutral location, a conference room at her law office, with Stephanie present. Madison arrived with Tyler and, surprisingly, without our parents. Her eyes were red from crying, but her expression was determined. Tyler looked uncomfortable, his usual confidence notably diminished. "This has gotten out of hand," Madison began. "I'm sorry about the text message. I was stressed and not thinking clearly. Of course you can be in the wedding party." "This isn't just about being in the wedding," I said calmly. "It's about how you've treated me throughout this process and about your plan to avoid repaying the money you borrowed." Madison's eyes widened, and Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice higher than normal. Stephanie silently slid copies of their email exchange across the table. The color drained from both their faces as they read their own words. "That was just venting," Madison said weakly. "We were never actually going to do that. I think your exact words were, 'Once we're married, we can just ignore the repayment thing with Abby,'" I quoted. "You were planning to defraud me from the beginning." "That's a serious accusation," Tyler interjected, lawyer mode activating. "Those emails could be interpreted many ways." "They could be," Stephanie agreed, "by a judge." "Is that really where you want this to go?" "Because right now, we have vendors on hold, funds frozen, and evidence of potential fraud that would interest not only a civil court, but possibly the district attorney." The meeting continued for nearly 2 hours, moving from denial to bargaining. Madison and Tyler eventually proposed a new agreement. They would immediately repay $40,000 from Tyler's personal savings, reduce the wedding costs by changing venues to Tyler's parents' country club, which would waive most fees, and commit to a strict repayment schedule for the remaining amount. I listened to their proposal, feeling oddly detached from the sister sitting across from me, tears streaming down her face as she promised this time would be different. After everything that had happened, after seeing the calculated way she and Tyler had planned to exploit my generosity, I simply couldn't trust anything she said. "No," I said finally. "I want full repayment of all funds transferred to date, minus the $9,000 currently frozen in the account, which I'll keep. You have 48 hours to arrange this, or we proceed with formal legal action and contact with all remaining vendors." "That's impossible," Madison cried. "We don't have that kind of money just sitting around." "Tyler's family does," I said, meeting his eyes directly. Or you can postpone the wedding until you can afford it honestly. You're really willing to destroy our relationship over money? Madison asked, her voice breaking. You already destroyed our relationship, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice remained. Not over money, but by showing me exactly how little you value me as your sister. The money is just the evidence. As they left the meeting, Madison turned back, her expression hardening. You'll regret this, she said quietly. When you're alone with your money and no family, you'll regret this. I watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and resolution. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. The 48-hour deadline passed without any payment from Madison and Tyler. As promised, Stephanie and I moved forward with formal legal action. We filed claims against both Madison and Tyler personally, as well as against the wedding accounts they had established with my funds. The court documents detailed the original loan agreement, the documented transfers, and included the damning email exchanges showing their intent to default. Beyond the legal filings, I contacted every vendor listed in the wedding planning documents, from the Drake Hotel down to the custom napkin printer. Each received a formal letter explaining that the funds used for deposits and payments were currently in dispute, along with documentation of my original transfers. I made it clear that proceeding with services without resolving the payment issue could potentially make them party to a financial dispute. The reaction was swift and comprehensive. The Drake Hotel, already concerned after my initial contact, officially put the event on hold status, requiring a new deposit within 10 days to maintain the date. The catering company, facing a significant outstanding balance, suspended all preparation activities and requested immediate clarification of payment responsibility. The florist, photographer, band, cake baker, and transportation service all responded similarly, unwilling to risk providing services that might go unpaid. Within 24 hours of these contacts, my phone became virtually unusable from the barrage of calls and texts. Madison's messages turned from threatening to desperate. The venue is canceling. Please stop this, followed by, I'll do anything, Abby, anything, and finally, you've ruined my life. I hope you're happy. Tyler's parents called next, his father Howard's usually reserved demeanor replaced with cold fury as he demanded I cease this vindictive campaign immediately. When I didn't answer, they escalated to having their family lawyer contact Stephanie, who calmly explained the legal basis for my actions and the evidence of fraud we possessed. The most dramatic response came from my parents. My mother left a voicemail where she was crying so hard I could barely understand her words, saying I had destroyed the family and asking how I could do this to my baby sister. My father's message was shorter but more cutting. No daughter of mine would do something this selfish and cruel. Fix this, or don't consider yourself part of this family anymore. Their words hurt deeply. But they also confirmed what I had suspected for years, that their love was conditional on me playing my assigned role, the responsible, self-sacrificing daughter who would always put Madison's needs first. Social media became another battleground. Madison posted a carefully worded status about heartbreak when family betrays you during your most important moments, garnering hundreds of sympathetic comments. Several of her bridesmaids, led by Jessica, posted more direct attacks, calling me jealous, bitter, and pathetic for trying to ruin Madison's wedding. I maintained my silence online, refusing to engage in a public argument. The family fallout extended beyond my parents and Madison. Aunts, uncles, and cousins began taking sides, most supporting Madison based on her version of events. I received several disappointed messages from relatives who had only heard that I was suing my own sister over her wedding. A few, however, reached out more neutrally, asking to hear my side of the story. To my surprise, after I explained the situation with documentation to my father's brother, Uncle Robert, he became my unexpected ally. I've watched how they've treated you your whole life, he told me during a supportive phone call. It's about time someone held them accountable. As the wedding vendors began officially withdrawing their services, the practical reality set in for Madison and Tyler. With just 18 days until the planned wedding date, They were effectively without a venue, catering, flowers, or most other essential services, while they could theoretically book new vendors. The short timeline and premium Saturday date made this nearly impossible without extraordinary additional costs. Tyler's parents, unwilling to see their son embarrassed by a canceled wedding, finally intervened financially. Howard Harrington contacted Stephanie directly, offering to pay the full amount I was owed in exchange for me withdrawing the vendor notices immediately. The offer came with a significant condition, however. I would need to sign a non-disclosure agreement about the entire situation and agree not to attend the rescheduled wedding. Before I could respond to this offer, my parents called an emergency family meeting at their house, insisting it was time to end this madness. Against Stephanie's advice, I agreed to attend, wanting to face my family directly after days of messages and intermediaries. Walking into my childhood home that evening felt surreal. My parents sat stiffly in the living room, while Madison and Tyler occupied the love seat, her eyes puffy from crying, his arm protectively around her shoulders. The tension was palpable as I took a seat alone in an armchair across from them. "This has gone far enough," my father began sternly. "Whatever disagreement you girls have, destroying Madison's wedding isn't the answer." "I agree," I said calmly. "The wedding shouldn't be destroyed. Madison and Tyler simply need to repay the money they borrowed and plan to default on." "It wasn't like that," Madison interjected, tears immediately flowing. "We were just stressed about wedding costs. We always planned to pay you back eventually." I pulled out printed copies of their emails and read them aloud. "Once we're married, we can just ignore the repayment thing with Abby. What's she going to do? Sue her own sister?" I looked up from the paper. "Your exact words, Madison." My mother gasped, looking genuinely shocked. My father's expression darkened, but he directed his anger at me rather than Madison. "Where did you get those emails? Were you spying on your sister?" "They were in the shared wedding planning account Madison gave me access to," I explained. "I found them when I was documenting our financial arrangements." "That was private correspondence," Tyler objected. "In an account created with my money that Madison specifically shared with me for wedding planning purposes," I countered. "And it directly addressed the loan I provided." "Everyone says things they don't mean when they're stressed," my mother said, reaching for Madison's hand. "I'm sure they never intended to actually default on the loan." "Actually," Tyler began reluctantly, "we did discuss delaying repayment indefinitely. The wedding costs kept mounting, and with our plans to buy a house next year." He trailed off at Madison's horrified expression. "Tyler," she hissed. "What are you doing?" "Being honest," he replied, straightening his shoulders. "My parents are offering to pay the full amount. There's no point continuing to lie." He turned to me. "We were wrong, Abby. The plan to delay repayment indefinitely was wrong. I let Madison believe we could handle more expenses than we realistically could, and then we both panicked." Madison's face crumpled, but for the first time, I saw something beyond her tears. A flash of calculation as she assessed the changing situation. She quickly composed herself and reached toward me imploringly. "I'm so sorry, Abby. I got caught up in creating the perfect wedding and lost sight of what really matters." Her voice quavered perfectly. "Can you ever forgive me? Can we please fix this and be sisters again?" 5 years ago, even 1 year ago, I would have accepted this performance as genuine. I would have forgiven her immediately, grateful for any acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no matter how strategic or temporary. But the person sitting across from me now was a stranger wearing my sister's face, someone who had methodically used me, planned to defraud me, and only expressed remorse when caught and confronted with consequences. "I accept Tyler's father's offer," I said evenly. "Full repayment in exchange for withdrawing the vendor notices. I'll sign the NDA. And I won't attend the wedding, as requested." "What?" Madison looked genuinely shocked. "No, I want you at the wedding. That was Tyler's parents' idea, not mine. I have no interest in attending a celebration founded on exploitation and lies," I said, standing up. "Once the funds are transferred, I'll direct Stephanie to withdraw all legal actions and vendor notices. You can have your perfect wedding, Madison. And I can have my life back. You can't just walk away from family." My father said, his voice rising. After everything we've done for you. I paused at the doorway, turning back to face them one last time. What exactly have you done for me? I put myself through college. I built my career without connections or support. I've been financially independent since I was 18. I met each of their eyes in turn. The only thing you gave me was the lesson that I would always come second to Madison's wants. It's a lesson I'm finally putting to good use. As I walked to my car, I heard Madison's wails through the open window, my mother's soothing murmurs, my father's angry exclamations. The familiar family dynamic playing out one last time without my participation. I drove away feeling lighter than I had in months, perhaps years, having finally freed myself from the role I had been playing my entire life. The next morning, Stephanie confirmed that Tyler's father had transferred the full $87,500 to my account. As promised, I instructed her to withdraw all legal actions and send notices to the vendors that the payment dispute had been resolved. I signed the non-disclosure agreement, which prevented me from publicly discussing the financial arrangements of the wedding, but didn't prohibit me from explaining my absence to friends or extended family. Madison's wedding was rescheduled for the following month at the Drake as originally planned, though I heard through relatives that many aspects were scaled back from her original vision. I sent a simple crystal vase as a gift with a card that read only "Congratulations," fulfilling the minimum social obligation without pretense of deeper feeling. On what would have been the wedding day, I traveled to a small beach town on Lake Michigan, a place Madison and I had visited as children, but that held no specific emotional memories. As I walked along the shore, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink, I allowed myself to fully feel the grief of losing my sister. Not to marriage, but to the revelation of who she truly was and had perhaps always been. The pain was real and deep, but alongside it grew something new and unexpected. A sense of freedom and self-respect that I had never fully experienced before. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself against my family's dysfunctional patterns and refused to be manipulated or exploited. The cost had been high, but as I watched the sun sink below the horizon, I knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it. The weeks following Madison's rescheduled wedding passed in a strange, quiet isolation. My parents maintained their position that I had betrayed the family, though my father's anger gradually softened to disappointed silence during the few brief, necessary communications we had about practical matters. My mother alternated between tearful pleas for reconciliation and cold recriminations, depending on her mood when calling. I established firm boundaries, keeping conversations brief and factual, redirecting emotional manipulation with calm detachment. Madison made no direct contact after the wedding. Through family gossip, primarily via Uncle Robert who had attended, I learned that the ceremony had proceeded smoothly, but with a noticeable tension among the Harrington family. Apparently, Tyler's parents had been less than pleased about having to cover such a significant financial shortfall, and their relationship with my parents had cooled considerably. The most difficult aspect of the aftermath was the profound loneliness. Having spent most of my adult life focused on my career and, more recently, Madison's wedding, I had neglected to build a robust social network of my own. The few friends I had, like Taylor and Stephanie, were supportive but had their own busy lives and families. Weekends stretched empty before me, no longer filled with wedding planning or family obligations. In this emptiness, however, I found unexpected space for healing. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Karen Lewis, who specialized in family dynamics and helping adults process childhood patterns. Our weekly sessions became anchors as I worked through the complex grief of losing my family. Not to death, but to the natural consequences of standing up for myself. What you're experiencing is actually quite common, Dr. Lewis explained during one particularly difficult session. When someone changes the role they've played in a dysfunctional family system, the entire system reacts to force them back into that role. Your family is essentially punishing you for refusing to be the responsible, self-sacrificing daughter anymore. So this pain is normal? I asked, clutching a tissue. Completely normal, she assured me. and necessary for growth. You're mourning the family you wished you had while coming to terms with the family you actually have. Through therapy, I began to recognize patterns that had shaped my entire life. How I had internalized at an early age that my value came from being useful, responsible, and accommodating. How I had accepted emotional scraps from my family, while Madison received the full feast of their approval and affection. How I had convinced myself that if I just tried harder, gave more, asked for less, I would finally be valued equally. 3 months after the wedding, an unexpected letter arrived in my mailbox, postmarked from Madison's address, but without a return name. Inside was a handwritten note on plain stationery rather than Madison's usual monogrammed paper. Abby, it began simply, things with Tyler aren't good. His parents hold the wedding money over our heads constantly, criticizing every decision we make. They're even trying to dictate where we should buy a house, insisting we live close to them since they invested so much in our future. Tyler and I fight constantly about standing up to them. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm now experiencing what I put you through. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now, too late, what I lost. Madison. I read the letter several times, feeling a complex mixture of vindication, sadness, and, surprisingly, concern for my sister. Despite everything, some part of me still cared about her well-being. I didn't respond immediately, instead bringing the letter to my next therapy session. Do you feel you owe her a response? Dr. Lewis asked after reading it. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to support her, out of habit, I guess. Another part feels like this might be another manipulation. Those are both valid possibilities, she acknowledged. The question is, what would serve your healing best right now? After careful consideration, I sent a brief, neutral response. Madison, I'm sorry to hear you're struggling. I hope you and Tyler find a way to establish healthy boundaries with his parents. Take care, Abby. Not an olive branch, exactly, but not a door slammed shut either. Around this same time, I learned through Uncle Robert that my parents were facing financial difficulties of their own. My father's construction company had lost several major contracts due to economic downturns, and they had overextended themselves with various investments and lifestyle expenses. They would likely need to downsize from their large home, a humbling prospect for my status-conscious mother. Under different circumstances, I might have offered financial assistance. I had the means, after all, with my recovered wedding funds and stable career. But our fractured relationship and their continued refusal to acknowledge their role in the wedding debacle made such an offer impossible. Instead, I provided Uncle Robert with the names of several excellent financial advisors, a small, distant form of help that maintained my boundaries. As 6 months became 9, and then a year, I gradually rebuilt my life around new priorities. I focused on deepening the few genuine friendships I had while cultivating new ones. Taylor introduced me to her weekly book club, where I connected with several women who knew nothing of my family drama and accepted me simply as I was. Stephanie invited me to join a hiking group that met monthly to explore trails throughout Illinois and neighboring states. Through these new connections, I began to create what therapists call a chosen family, people who valued me for myself rather than what I could do for them. I celebrated Thanksgiving with Taylor's boisterous extended family, who welcomed me with genuine warmth. I spent a weekend helping Stephanie move into her new condo, the kind of practical support I had always provided to others but rarely received in return. My career flourished as well. Without the constant drain of Madison's wedding demands, I focused more energy on my clients and professional development. I earned a significant promotion and began mentoring younger financial advisors, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping others navigate their careers. Perhaps most importantly, I developed a new relationship with myself. I learned to recognize my own worth beyond utility, to set boundaries without guilt, to treat myself with the same care and consideration I had always offered others. Simple acts of self-respect that once would have seemed selfish became natural. Declining invitations when I needed rest, expressing my true opinions even when they might not please others, investing in my own joy without justification. On the 1-year anniversary of the wedding day, I took myself on a solo trip to Sedona, Arizona, a place I had always wanted to visit but had never prioritized. As I hiked among the stunning red rock formations, watching the sunset paint the landscape in breathtaking colors, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The loss of my family as I had known it still ached, a dull pain that flared occasionally into sharp grief. But alongside that pain had grown something beautiful and unexpected. A profound sense of peace with myself, a quiet confidence in my own value that no longer depended on others' validation or approval. I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and ultimately for others, is to refuse to participate in harmful patterns, even when that refusal comes at great personal cost. I had learned that respect, both self-respect and mutual respect, is the foundation of any healthy relationship, and without it, no amount of shared history or blood connection can create genuine love. Most importantly, I had learned that shutting down toxic situations, while painful in the moment, creates space for authentic growth and healing. By saying no to being exploited by my sister and enabling my family's dysfunction, I had finally said yes to myself, to my own worth, to the possibility of genuine connections based on mutual care rather than obligation or role fulfillment. As I stood on a Sedona Vista point, watching the sun sink below the horizon, I felt a profound gratitude for the painful lessons of the past year. The $96,000 had been recovered, but the true value had been in the priceless self-knowledge that came with standing up for myself. That money had bought something after all, not a perfect wedding, but a perfect opportunity to finally break free from patterns that had constrained me my entire life. I still don't know what the future holds for my relationship with Madison or my parents. Perhaps, in time, new and healthier connections might be possible. Or perhaps our paths have permanently diverged. What I do know is that whatever comes next, I will face it as my authentic self. No longer defined by others' expectations or needs, but by my own values and boundaries. If you've ever had to make the difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself, I hope my story has resonated with you. Family dynamics can be incredibly complex, and sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is step back, even when it breaks our hearts. If you've been through something similar or are struggling with setting boundaries with loved ones, please share your experience in the comments below. Subscribe to hear more stories of personal growth through difficult times, and hit that like button if you believe that self-respect is never selfish. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes you have to shut down what's hurting you to open up to what can heal you.